Oh, well, hello there, folks. Good afternoon. For just this short time that Leshy has granted me, I'll be your host, Joe, and I'm here to talk just a little bit about music, myth, and history. As a former retail worker, I don't mind telling you that November through December can be a harrowing time if you don't much care for Christmas music. There's so much of it, it's everywhere, and it all kind of blends together. Except for the very few examples of really annoying things, like Paul McCartney or All I Want for Christmas Is My Two Front Teeth. There's a good chance that if someone plays a few bars of one of the weird other Christmas songs that you don't really pay that much attention to, you'll at least be able to spot the tune, even if you can't name it. Kinda like this one. You know this tune, right? Sounds familiar? You've probably heard the version of this song sung by Bing Crosby. It's actually much older than that. And in a very real but also very technical sense, it's almost as old as King Wenceslas himself. But we'll get back to that in a minute. For now, this song is Good King Wenceslas. Now the song Good King Wenceslas was penned in 1853 by an English hymn writer named John Mason Neale, or rather the lyrics were written by him. The music itself, as indicated earlier, is a much older piece. The lyrics were written to fit the tune of a medieval spring carol, Tempus Adest Floridum, which dates back to the 13th century. And yes, carols these days pretty much relegated to Christmas, they used to have them for all seasons and all occasions. Let's talk for a moment about the historical figure that this whole thing is based off of. Wenceslas I. First of all, he wasn't a king. He was the Duke of Bohemia in the 10th century. I'm not going to get any more specific because the date of his death is contested on the Wikipedia article, and I'm not about to do actual research. The important thing is, he died super young, like mid-20s young. He became the ruler of Bohemia in 921 after the death of his father in a battle with the Hungarians. His father was also a very young king, and also died in his mid-20s. Man, the Premyslid dynasty just seems to have had a thing going in the early days. They broke that trend pretty quickly, but the first couple of folks did not last. Legend has it that he was a very good ruler, actually. He would apparently visit the poor and the downtrodden in his duchy, and he'd give them food and money and whatever help he could offer, and because of this, he's known to this day as Wenceslas the Good. You will never guess what his brother, Boleslas the Cruel, is known for. Actually, you might. If you guessed murder, you got it. Boleslas and some of the local nobility invited Wenceslas to one of the minor Catholic feasts and jumped him, stabbing him to death with a variety of pointy objects, including but not limited to swords. I mean, the guy's got to earn the title the Cruel somehow, right? He, of course, managed to reign longer than both his father and his brother combined. I mean, you know what they say about only the good die young, right? Wenceslas not only would earn the title of king somehow, but he also was canonized as a saint. Now, to be a saint, you need two things. You need to first die a martyr, and you need to have performed miracles. Now, I have looked. The most I can find is that miracles were happening at the tomb of Wenceslas, so his brother had his body moved. I have consulted various Catholic websites and the Orthodox Wiki, and if they don't have more details, they don't exist. These are the saint-based people here, and if they don't got it, I don't know where else to look. He's considered to have been martyred because his younger brother was a pagan, kind of like their mother, and Wenceslas was trying to convert his subjects to Christianity. So, in a sense that counts for this, he was killed for Christianity, so that counts as being a martyr for them. The weird thing is that posthumous miracles, like doing the miracles after you've died, for me, that feels like cheating, but apparently that's actually the only acceptable way to do it. If you do the miracles while you're alive, it doesn't count. It's got to be something after you've died, which is just, it sounds so bizarre to me, because it's not like somebody can attribute that directly to you. I saw him doing this. No, you didn't. It happened near his tomb. You don't know what the cause of that is. But I digress. I'm not here to question the ecclesiastical traditions of which church and what group. I'm just here to say the facts that he is considered a saint because miracles happened near his tomb. It's also worth mentioning that he had a sidekick, a loyal and faithful page named Podvin, who managed to kill one of Wenceslas' attackers, but then was himself killed. He didn't have any miracles in him, though, so he didn't get sainthood. I suppose he also technically wasn't martyred. He was getting revenge for his dead, not king, but his dead duke. So, you know, he's good enough to be mentioned in the song, but he's not saint material, I guess. Wenceslas is an example of a trope in historical fiction of the righteous and just king, who gets his authority from his piety and his goodness of heart. We've all seen examples of this, you know, in various pieces of fiction. The rightful ruler of the land is a mighty warrior and a just ruler, a good stand-up fella. You know, you've got your Aragorns, you've got your Varian Rins, you've got your King Arthurs. The same is applied to historical figures as well, and Wenceslas is just one example. There's also romanticized versions of Charlemagne out there, and of course, need I mention King Richard the Lionheart? Prince John gets blamed for high taxes, but Richard's the one who financed a crusade halfway around the world and then got captured and held for ransom. In a more accurate Robin Hood, he'd get back and he'd say, "Hey, the taxes are staying, folks. We've actually owed the Holy Roman Empire a whole lot of money." Except he'd have said it in French, and he would have gone to France, and Richard's court was actually in France, not England. But we're talking about Wenceslas. Hey, actually, speaking about the Holy Roman Empire, if you were wondering why Wenceslas, the Duke of Bohemia, is known as King Wenceslas in this story, you could actually blame the Holy Roman Empire for that. Otto I, possibly the greatest emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, decided that like 30 years after his death, Wenceslas had a certain regality and nobility to him, and granted him the title of king posthumously. This was of course after Otto invaded Bohemia and put Boleslas' son to death. The Holy Roman Empire was not going to abide a pagan king in Bohemia. It was not going to happen. There are, to this day, regular pilgrimages from Wenceslas' original burial site to where he's buried now in St. Vitus Cathedral in Prague Castle. Sometimes his skull gets to go for walks too. The Czechs, they love them some bones, what can I say? I've been to the bone church. I gotta estimate a good portion of the tourism in the nation's gotta be bone-based. So we've talked about the man enough. Why don't we have a few words about the song too, now that we've got some background on the subject. Good King Wenceslas looked out on the feasts of Stephen. So right away, this is taking place after Christmas. Sort of. Christmas itself used to be a whole slew of holidays back to back. You know the other Christmas carol, the 12 Days of Christmas? Yeah, it lasted 12 whole days. If we were still living as nature intended, we'd be practically hibernating through December, so you could take a third of the month as a festival. It was no problem. Good luck getting that time off work now. Christmas, of course, is the first day, then the Feast of St. Stephen is the second, December 26th. Stephen, of course, is thought of as the first Christian martyr, having been killed in a stoning in the mid-30s AD, which, supposedly, Paul himself threw rocks at. How Stephen is the first martyr in Christianity and not Jesus is beyond me. I guess maybe he doesn't count? He seems pretty important, though. Is that an oversight, maybe? I don't know. Once again, I am not here to call into question ecclesiastical traditions. When the snow lay round about, deep and crisp and even, brightly shone the moon that night, though the frost was cruel, when a poor man came in sight, gathering winter fuel. December 26th, it is cold, it is dark. The Duke sees a fella out in the cold, trying to get some firewood together. Turns to his buddy Podvin and he says to him, "Hither, page, and stand by me, if thou know'st it telling, yonder peasant, who is he, where and what his dwelling?" Podvin, of course, responds, "Sire, he lives a good league hence, underneath the mountain, right against the forest fence, by St. Agnes' fountain." So he asks his page, who doesn't even get the dignity of a name here, it's Podvin, who that fellow is and how far away from home he is. Podvin apparently has perfect knowledge of all things Bohemian. He knows exactly who that is, and he knows that he lives like 3 miles away. "Bring me flesh and bring me wine, bring me pine logs hither. Thou and I shall see him dine when we bear them thither. Page and monarch, forth they went together, through the wind's wild lament and the bitter weather. So he and Podvin go out into the cold night. They get supplies to help the guy out. It's Christmas after all. Or I guess it's the Feast of St. Stephen, that's close enough. No man should freeze to death on Christmas in Wenceslas's duchy. He intends to have this peasant in for a feast and a fire to warm him up. I mean, the holiday is a feast. You better live up to that name, right? Sire, the wind is darker now, and the wind blows stronger. Fails my heart, I know not how, I can go not longer. Mark my footsteps, good my page, tread thou in them boldly. Thou shalt find the winter's rage freezes thy blood less coldly. It's cold, oh my god, it's cold. Podvin doesn't think he can even keep moving, that's how cold it is. Wenceslas tells him, just walk in his footsteps. It'll keep the snow from getting into your boots. That's definitely a better strategy. We've all done this on deep snow, I'm sure, right? I also need to comment. That's a very strange rhyme. In his master's steps he trod, where the snow lay dinted. Heat was in the very sod, which the saint had printed. So he does it, and it works. Not only does Podvin stop freezing, he actually warms up by stepping in Wenceslas's footsteps somehow. I guess the idea is God was putting heat directly into his feet. Is God into feet? I don't know. Therefore, Christian men, be sure, wealth or rank possessing, ye who now will bless the poor, shall for yourselves find blessing. What a strange rhyme. And the moral of the story is spelled out in the final paragraph. Seems to be that if you do your part to help the poor, you yourself may find yourself helped. What goes around comes around, and so do good things apparently. And I can appreciate the sentiment, but again, Wenceslas was murdered horrifically, despite supposedly being by all accounts a stand-up fella. So maybe he isn't the best spokesman for this message, just saying. This song has not been without its controversy. In the early days, a lot of people actually didn't even like it as a real Christmas song, because they knew it was adapted from an Easter hymn. That the rhyming scheme was clumsy at best, I think I've definitely experienced that here tonight, and that it would soon be hopefully forgotten. Then Bing Crosby came along and, well, now we're stuck with it. But I hope you learned something from this. Now I'm going to go make some hot chocolate, maybe steam some milk for it, but first I'll pass the reins back to my good friend Leshy. I hope you all have a wonderful holiday season, and that the knowledge of a dead 1,000-year-old king from the Bohemian Duchy somehow helps you out. Have a good night.